Hello, everyone, and welcome to my favorite time of the week, where I get to talk about fantasy nonsense and character design. It's part two of my turning flowers into fantasy characters, and this time I'll be drawing an Iris Mage. Hope you enjoy. So, after I had so much fun finishing my Lilac Princess character, I knew that I wanted to do more of these designs and immediately ran to Pinterest to make a board and get inspiration. I settled on irises as the choice of flower for this one because they're one of my mom's and my favorite flowers. When I was a kid, she would always plant them in front of our house, so I just really like them. Whenever I see them, I'm always reminded of that time and also the spring. I think they're spring. I hope they're spring. When I first started this design, I hadn't intended, when I first started this series, I hadn't intended to give each flower an RPG-like class. I don't know if saying RPG is exactly correct, but that's just how I'm thinking of it. But after the Lilac design, I felt like it would be fun to go in that sort of direction. That's why the Lilac character has a really generic class, if you can say class, which is Princess, because I hadn't yet decided that I wanted to give them more fleshed out lore. This illustration, though, I did more planning in advance and settled on a Mage design, because I think that's just really fun. Unlike my usual process, I started with doing a very basic digital sketch before blocking out a silhouette and choosing colors. I had originally planned to do the opposite, that is choose colors first, but I found that really difficult as I had these two pictures of irises. I think you can see them on the screen right now. So I was picking colors from both of them, and they were just really different from each other. The first is dark purple with spots of yellow at the center, while the second has some petals that were light pink, while some are light purple. Initially, I tried to draw color inspiration from both, and it just got really messy, so I eventually settled on the second iris, which just had more light pinks and purples in it. Still, I chose to incorporate some yellows and greens because of the stems of those irises. Design-wise, I surprised myself by not drawing too heavily from Pinterest and creating a character I felt was original and fun. So after doing an initial sketch in my sketchbook, I decided that based on the shapes of iris petals, this character should have very puffy skirts and ruffles if possible. Also, I tried to make the short cape and overskirt try to emulate the shapes of iris petals. Because this character is also a mage, I added a witch hat and a staff, and chose a pose that made it look like she was levitating or floating. I think choosing that sort of pose really added to the overall look of the piece because it made the cape and skirts appear more dynamic and flowy. One of the things that I kind of struggled on with this design was the head. Mainly, one, how the angle of the face should look, and two, what sort of hairstyle would match the overall look of the character. Originally, I had some really cool ringlet or curly half-up hairstyles planned, but once I added the hat to go for the mage vibe, those ideas were kind of out of the window. In the end, I landed on a hairstyle that would match other elements of the character, which is to say I settled on flowy long hair. The bangs were pretty difficult for me to draw because of the way the character is looking up, so they look pretty rough for a while, as you can see in this sort of sketch. But don't even worry, I eventually get them into a place that I'm semi-happy with. Not sure if I can say the same for the head angle though. I think that sort of angle is definitely something I need to work on more in the future, but for a first try, it's not bad at all. Unexpectedly, my favorite thing to render in this illustration wasn't the head, but was actually the clothes. Usually, I find rendering clothes to be a bit tedious, although it definitely depends on the type of clothing. This time though, my favorite part to paint was definitely the skirt. I've never painted a pleated skirt like this before, so right now I want to talk a little bit about my process for painting new or unfamiliar things. Self-taught artist here, so I'm probably going to parrot art advice that you've heard a million times. Sorry in advance. The first tip is obviously use reference. Pretend I'm all capsing that. Use reference. Just do it. Double underline, highlight that in your brain or something, because this tip applies to literally everything and will never, ever go away. Drawing unfamiliar things, like for me a pleated skirt, without using reference is pretty much like asking to mess up in some way. So yeah, use reference. Maybe other people are different, but I, for one, really struggle with imagining things. Yeah, so using reference is always really helpful for me. My second tip is to break things up into simpler shapes. This is also a tip that will apply to drawing literally anything. Definitely looking at hands, drawing hands, making them into shapes is so much easier. For the pleated skirt, breaking things up into shapes meant making individual pleats into triangles, which more or less radiated out from a single point somewhere in the waist area. Are the shapes perfect? No, but the skirt does look like it has fairly believable pleats, so I'm happy with it. And finally, my third tip is to manage your expectations. I don't mean this in a pessimistic way. Rather, it's good to keep in mind that if you're drawing something for the first time, you really shouldn't expect perfection and also shouldn't be disappointed if things don't turn out exactly the way you want them to. The important part is that you're breaking out of your usual art repertoire by drawing something new and by analyzing it more closely through any sketch, whether it's good or not so good. And that will get you closer to making things look the way you want them to. I feel like this is something I constantly have to remind myself of. Mileage is what's important. Mileage is important. No matter if I'm disappointed with the result, the important part is that I'm practicing and constantly gaining experience, both through failures and successes. Going off on a tangent here, I feel very strongly about this, so sorry. I think that's my biggest problem with social media as an artist. There's just so much pressure to constantly produce content that seems perfect, whereas all the hard work that you've put in to get to that point is just like largely ignored. Like, yes, I'm proud of a finished piece I've made, whatever it may be, but we also need to acknowledge all the little mistakes that are made to get to that point and how they contribute to the end result. I don't know if any of this is making sense, but my point is that I wish social media didn't put so much pressure on posting good art when in reality bad art, I'm using air quotes around bad here because it's important too, is just as important to the art process. You should make things that make you happy without the pressure of perfection. Like, seriously, just do what you want. That's all. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. As you may have guessed, I have a lot of feelings about social media, but for now, I will move on. Now I want to get into more potential lore regarding this character. I say potential because I don't have anything definitively fleshed out yet, but these are my initial thoughts. As I explained in part 1, I want each flower character to be a deity with a specific discipline. My lilac character is going to be the goddess of nature / plants / botany. That's too broad though, so specifics are pending based off of how many characters I end up adding to this world. My iris mage, I've decided, is going to be the goddess of some type of magic. Initially, I was sort of considering illusory magic, but I don't think that fits the overall vibe of the flower, so I'm tentatively saying that she's the goddess of either flight or gravity. While flight might be a better direction to go in because iris petals sort of look like wings, I'm making some leaps here, don't come for me. Gravity really appeals to me because it's a more ambiguous concept. Like, not only can she make herself lighter, she can also crush her enemies with really strong gravitational force. Yippee! Don't get on her bad side, I guess, or else she'll knock your planet out of alignment or something. I don't know how these things work. Generally, though, I like the idea of making deities based around more nebulous concepts, like making a god or goddess of rot or spite or chaos or frenzy just sounds so much more interesting to me than making like a god or goddess of water or fire or something like that. I don't know. Don't get me wrong, I'm likely going to be making characters that fall into both sides of that, but I'm being very heavily influenced by media right now that falls on the side of characters having very conceptual powers or abilities. If there's one thing about me, it's that I love to read fantasy books where you have no idea what's going on half the time, and the magic system is basically indecipherable. Good stuff. We love a fantasy nonsense meal on this channel. Sorry if my voice sounds scratchy for the rest of this video. I sort of got a bit of a cold between recordings, but anyways, I hope you all don't mind these sorts of tangents, since I think it'd be boring to just talk about my art process the whole time. But that being said, back to what's actually happening in my art process. At this point, I've gotten most of the big stuff rendered, most of the clothes, the hands, the shoes. So what I have left is the staff, the hair, and the head. I started with rendering the staff and ended with the head/hair, mainly because I was afraid of that head angle. Once again, it's sometimes hard for me to take the leap and draw poses, elements of characters, etc. that I've never done before, especially with the knowledge that people on the internet are going to see the end result. But I have to remind myself that I've started making YouTube videos simply to document my own art progress, and any viewers I might have probably have completely different reference points and opinions than me, so always gotta keep that in mind. Anyways, I found the staff to be unexpectedly fun to render. I was originally going for a very smooth, gleaming wooden staff look, but decided to make it more like gnarled and textured the way an actual tree might look. From there, I added bits of green to I just heard banging in the background, I'm sorry. From there, I added bits of green to make it look like the tendrils of a plant or vine are wrapping around it, and then painted in some gold embellishments and rendered some ambiguous hanging orbs at the top end of the staff. Because Mage. I think the overall look is much more interesting than what I had originally planned, and I'm really happy with it. From there, I go back to the portrait in the bottom right of the canvas and start fixing things up a bit more. I added some additional line work to the face and neck, blended out some portions of the hair, and added more details to the cape and hat. I also decided to add freckles last minute because I wanted the face to look a bit more interesting texture-wise. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, so let me know what y'all think. Usually I tend to miss small details like this, and I miss them quite often, but if I'm being honest, when I do remember them, I think they add a lot to the illustration as a whole. I have a pretty short attention span when it comes to art. I usually only draw for an hour or two at a time, which means that when I come back to a piece, I sometimes forget what I had originally intended to do. Once the head was done, I pasted it onto the full body illustration, worked on rendering the rest of the hair. I think the shape I was aiming for turned out really nicely, and I think it had a great plant/vine vibes with the way the ends of the hair curl around each other. And then from there, it's really just a matter of adding finishing touches. You see that I added those little baubles to the bottom of the skirt. Now I'm messing around with a very simple square background. I think I added some highlights and some glowing bits as well. And then, yeah, that's about it. I also have a white outline that I'm adding in there. But overall, I'm really happy with the way this piece went. I have two at least, probably 3 more characters planned out at the moment in this series, so I hope y'all are looking forward to that. But if you have any other video suggestions, they would be super appreciated. I'm not sure how interesting all these flower designs are. I think they're really fun, but you know, it'd be nice to spice things up every once in a while as well. Yeah, but that's pretty much what I got. This is the finished piece. I'm still adding the white in and trying to think of things to say while it's happening. But yeah, that's the finished piece. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you like the end result. Bye!